Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jordan and thank you so much for clicking on one of my bookish videos. Today I'm super excited because I'm going to be filming the mid-year book freakout tag, which is one of my favorite book tags and videos to watch on booktube. I have had such a good reading year so far. I have found so many amazing books and read so many amazing books and read a lot of new books by new authors and in new genres, and I'm excited to talk about my favorites. So if you want to see me do the mid-year book freakout tag, then keep on watching. Okay, so the first question is, what is the best book of the year so far? What is your favorite book of the year? And this is a no-brainer for me so far. There has been one very, very clear standout, even though it's been really hard to narrow down what are like my top books of the year. I think I am planning to still film a separate video with my top 10 books of the year so far, because I kind of just want to talk more in depth about each of my favorites and then also see how my top 10 changes from now midway through the year until the end of the year. But in terms of my favorite book of the year so far, that would be Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This book is a 6-star book for me. It is my new favorite V.E. Schwab book, and I just had the most fun time reading this book. If you have not heard me talk about this already, because I have been basically since I read it in March, this book is marketed as Toxic Lesbian Vampires. It is about 3 women vampires who are living in 3 very different time periods. They are all turned into vampires, and then throughout the book you follow each of them living their own life, dealing with a lot of anger, rage, toxic relationships, and obsession and hunger for other people. And then they kind of intertwine their storylines by the end of this book, impacting each other. This is so beautifully written. The prose is very like lyrical. I underlined so many quotes in this book, and I've already read it twice this year, but I'm planning to reread by listening to the audiobook because I've heard fantastic things about the narrators. So this is a must read for me. Okay, the next question is, what is the best sequel of the year so far? And obviously I had to pick Oathbound by Tracy Deonn. This is the 3rd book in the Legendborn cycle series, so I'm not going to talk about it too in depth because at this point in the series there's a lot of spoilers for everything that happens in this book. But this series follows Bree, who is this like magic wielder. She basically comes to power in this like society of Arthur and his knights, which is a society that's very prestigious and is basically entrenched very much in different white families that are in power. And Bree is this black girl who kind of comes in and shakes everything up, becoming one of the most powerful figures in the society. And I just love this series. It is one of my favorite young adult fantasy series of all time. Tracy's writing and the representation and the characters in this book are so phenomenal. Bree is one of my favorite female main characters. She's just so strong while also showcasing a lot of her trauma and grief, and I love all of the side characters and the love triangle in this series. Next is a new release that you've yet to read that you really want to read. And honestly, this question was hard for me because I feel like I've been pretty on it this year with new releases, mainly because of reading advanced copies that I'm sent, but also all of the new releases that I'm like dying to read. I feel like because I'm very active in the book community, I know about and I'm like running out to read and get right away. But 2 that I think I would like to read are Not Safe for Work and then Broken Country. Not Safe for Work is a romance book, adult romance book, and Broken Country is, I think, like a mystery thriller. I've seen a lot about both the books and they seem like 2 authors I would want to check out. So I'm hoping I'll be able to read them sometime this year, maybe Not Safe for Work over the summer, but we will see. The next question is the most anticipated releases for the rest of the year, and I do have quite a few. So first, I will say Catabasis by R.F. Kong. I actually am reading the arc of this right now. out, and I am literally loving it so much. R.F. Kong, Rebecca, is a genius. She is so good at what she does, and I'm reading the ebook, but I definitely cannot wait to go out and get the physical book when it releases in August to reread. Another book that I am super excited to read that is coming out in October is Girl Dinner by Olivia Blake. I was gifted this early copy by Tor Books, so thank you to them. Olivia is one of my favorite authors of all time, and she's been talking about this book for a bit, and I've heard a lot of buzz surrounding it. It is essentially like a satirical, kind of dark comedy book about power, lust, and eating your fill as wealthy moms and sorority girls practice a sinister new wellness trend. And she's compared it kind of to similar vibes of Yellowface by R.F. Kong, so I'm super excited to read this one soon. Two other books that I'm very excited to read are Soul Searching by Lila Sage, which I believe comes out in September or October, and then Good Spirits by B.K. Borison, which I think comes out in October. The two of these books are romance books. Lila Sage is the author of the Rebel Blue Ranch series, which I absolutely love, and B.K. Borison is the author of the Love Light Farm series and the Heartstrings, I think it's called, series, and I love all of their books. I'm super excited for Soul Searching. I think I'm gonna mess this up, but I think it's like a paranormal, ghost-ish, another small town romance. And then Good Spirits, I'm also pretty sure is like a paranormal-ish romance. I could be butchering it. I never really know what books are about. I just know if I love the author, I'm going to read their books, and the two of these are top priority for me. Okay, the next question is biggest disappointment of the year so far, and the one that sticks out in my mind, because I'm gonna be honest, I have personally had a really great reading year. Like, all of the books that I was dying to read, that I was heavily anticipating, have been very good in my opinion. However, Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez unfortunately was not as big of a hit as I expected it to be. I love Abby Jimenez's books. I've enjoyed all of her books. Just for the Summer was one of my favorite books of last year, and unfortunately Say You'll Remember Me was just not the type of romance book that I really enjoy. I'm still going to be reading Abby's books in the future, but I definitely do not enjoy insta love tropes. That was affirmed by this book, and I just didn't really connect to the characters that much. Next is what books have surprised you the most, and I have two books for that. First, I have The Bright Years by Sarah Damoff. This was a debut novel by this author, and so because I've never read her books before and she's never released something before, and I kind of just heard about this book on a whim by one of my friends, Taylor, when she read an early copy, I was excited for it but didn't have super high hopes, and I ended up loving this. I gave it a 5 stars. It definitely is one of my favorite books of the year. This book is essentially about this family who is dealing with alcoholism, addiction, grief throughout the years. It is a love story between multiple different couples, multiple different generations. It starts out with this son of an alcoholic dad, an abusive dad, and his love story with his partner that he meets, and then it turns into the daughter and the trauma and challenges she has to go through with her father, who ends up being an alcoholic, and then her love story. And this was just such a moving, emotional book. I cried so much. I was so impressed by the writing in this book and the characters, and I loved it. Another surprise for me was Disappoint Me by Nicola Deenan. This surprised me because I just had not really heard anything about it, and again, I read an early copy. This book was gifted to me by the Dial Press, so thank you very much to them. I had wanted to read this book as part of my my own like trans readathon. I've been trying to read more books by trans authors and about trans characters. This book is about Max, who is a transgender woman, and it basically is just following Max as she tries to navigate life as a trans woman and just someone, I think, in her 30s, trying to figure out her family relationships and her romantic relationships. She is someone who has dealt with a lot of angst and messiness and complicated relationships in the past regarding her being a trans woman. In this book, you follow her new romantic relationship and kind of all of the hidden emotions that it brings up, and I just absolutely loved it. Again, I thought it really featured complex, flawed, really wonderful characters who just seemed so real to me, and I feel like I went through a journey with Max in this book. Okay, the next question is newest favorite author, either debut or to you, and I have to say the one that stands out to me is Kennedy Ryan. I've been wanting to read Kennedy Ryan's books for so long. I don't know why I put them off. I think I knew that they were going to emotionally wreck me, and sure enough, Before I Let Go definitely did wreck me. But I have now read her Skyland series, which I absolutely loved, and I'm currently reading Real by her, which I have a feeling is going to be my favorite Kennedy book and one of my favorite romance books of the year. I just love how real her characters feel and how dynamic her female main characters are. Again, the Black representation is fantastic, and the way that she handles very emotional and difficult topics in each of her books, I think is really beautiful. In this book, Before I Let Go, is about Yasmin, who deals with depression and trauma after losing one of her children and dealing with a lot of grief. And then Real, which I'm reading right now, deals with a character who has lupus, so chronic illness representation. And I just love Kennedy's writing. Okay, the next question is newest fictional crush, and I definitely have multiple, but again, the ones that came to mind right away are Charlie Florrick from One Golden Summer. I fell in love with this man in this book. This so far is my favorite romance book of the year, but Charlie's character, I feel like we just got so much growth and so much development of him from when he appeared in Every Summer After. He's just my ideal man. Like, he's jokey, he's fun, he really is in tune with other people's emotions and is deeply flawed and working on himself. And then I also have to give shout outs to Ryan Shea, The Right Move. I finally read the Windy City series this year, and this was the book that got me into the series. Ryan Shea, I will think about you forever. You beautiful boy. You made me obsessed with basketball. And I just love my acts of service, words of affirmation man. And then I also have to give a shout out to Isaiah Rhodes from Play Along. I have heard about this man for so long, and as soon as I read this book, I understood. I, again, love his very jokey, flirty personality and how it seems like he doesn't take anything seriously, but he really focuses in and loves hard for the people that he cares about. Okay, the next question is your new favorite fictional character, and I think the one that I have to say and that I related to the most was Yasmin in Before I Let Go. I just really related to Yasmin's thoughts, her inner struggles, her mental health and mental illness issues that she deals with. Yasmin, like I said, is someone who dealt with a lot of depression and suicidal thoughts after losing one of her children in childbirth. She had a stillbirth, and then she is also dealing with the grief of losing another loved one. Just her inner dialogue and the way that she worked so hard on herself in therapy and with medication, I really could relate to her character, and I loved her. The next question is book that made you cry, and one thing about me, I pick books to cry. I want to feel emotional when I'm reading a book, and if I end up crying from a book, normally that means that it's going to become one of my favorite books and will be a 5-star read. So I have quite a few to mention. question. First, I'm gonna say again before I let go, I cried throughout this book just at so many different scenes and relating to Yasmin's character. I don't know what was going on with me when I read this book, but I cried so much listening to One Golden Summer. I think it was just the angst and the tension and the vulnerability between Charlie and Alice in this book. There were so many parts that I could relate to, and I felt so deeply like I was in each of their shoes in the middle of the mess that they found themselves in. Okay, then I did a reread recently of Happy Place by Emily Henry, and I sobbed like a baby reading this book. I loved it the first time I read it, but something about this reread, listening to it on audiobook, broke me. I cried multiple times. Just the angst and the hidden love and romance that both of them feel for each other was next level. Then another book that I recently read and cried throughout was Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book, I cried so hard at the ending, even though I low-key cheated and like figured out what was going to happen because I was so anxious about how the story would end. But again, just Joan's character and her relationships with other people and her inner dialogue just made me cry. And then finally, first book of the year that made me cry was My Friends by Frederick Bachman. I read this in January and I just reread it in May and I cried both times. The writing and the friendship in this book and the hardships and challenges and trauma that the teenage friends goes through was heartbreaking, and I cried so hard at the end of this book. A lot is revealed about these friends. Next is the book that made you happy this year, and I have two. So first, I have Audrey and Bash Are Just Friends by Tia Williams. This book was gifted to me by Little Brown and Co. Young Readers, so thank you to them. This is Tia Williams' young adult romance book that came out in May, and I just love this book. Like, it reminded me so much of why I love young adult romance books. The depth of the characters and the themes and just like the teenage angst was so well depicted, and I just loved the banter between Audrey and Bash. And then another book that I recently read that made me so happy was Problematic Summer Romance by Ali Hazelwood. Something about this book and just picturing myself being in Italy with these characters at this wedding was so perfect. I will say this book did make me emotional and feel anxious inside about how this relationship was going to end between Maya and Connor, but most of the time I just really loved the dynamics between Maya and Connor. They made me laugh and I loved reading it. The next question is, what is the most beautiful book that you bought or received this year? And I honestly have to say The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition with these very beautiful sprayed edges. The cover is stunning, and then the inside cover under the jacket is beautiful. Love this book so much. It's one of my favorite books of the year, and I just think this cover is absolutely stunning. I didn't really get it until I saw it in person, and after I read the book, I'm like, this cover is genius, and the artwork on this book is just so well done. All right, the final question is, what books do you have to read for the rest of the year? And I have a few that are like top of my TBR. I cannot wait to read. First, I have Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I have been wanting to read this book for so long. It is, I believe, an adult fantasy book. It is by an Indigenous author, and I think it's like a combination of science fiction and fantasy. I honestly don't know what it's about, but I've heard amazing things. Like, everyone I know that's read this book has absolutely loved it, and I've been wanting to read this author's books. I'm going to be reading this very soon. And then I have Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I think I bought this physical book at the end of 2024 as one of like my priority books to read in 2025. And then I kind of went deep down the rabbit hole with Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive series. But now that I am done that series, I want to go back to reading this one. From what I've heard, very different vibes. This is more of like a romance fantasy, and I think it's a lot more like cozy cozy fantasy, slow paced, but I've heard that this writing and the romance in this is very, very beautiful, and I want to keep reading his books. Last book that I cannot wait to read is Our Vicious Oaths by N.E. Davenport. I was gifted a copy of this book by Harper Voyager, so thank you so much to them. I have been hearing so much about this book, and it's being released in October, I believe, but it is this author's fantasy romance romantasy standalone debut, and I am so excited. I honestly have been feeling like, give or take, kind of burnt out by the romantasy genre. However, this book was something I was like, I need to read. It sounds so interesting. I just feel like it's going to be a unique world, which is really what I crave when I'm reading a romantasy book. Okay, so that is it for this mid-year book freakout tag video. I hope that you enjoyed seeing some of my favorite books of the year in a lot of different categories and topics. I love this freakout tag because I love seeing people's favorite books for different reasons, whether it made them happy, it made them cry, it was something that just completely shocked them out of the blue that they enjoyed. I always end up adding so many books to my TBR after watching these videos every summer. So hopefully you got to know me a little bit better, my reading tastes, and got to see some of my favorite books this year. Like I said, I think I'm still planning to film my top 10 books of the year so far at the end of June, just to compare at the end of 2025 and see if anything has changed. So keep an eye out for that. And I would love to hear what your favorite book of 2025 has been so far. And as always, if you loved watching this video, I would love it if you subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!